strange ship looms on the horizon of the South Atlantic as American cargo vessel SS Stephen Hopkins sails through the morning fog on September 27, 1942. American lookouts initially identify the ship as just another merchant, but looking closer, they begin to notice a flurry of strange activity. False deck panels are being removed, and the shape of the ship is changing before their eyes. There's barely any time for warning when shells come smashing through Stephen Hopkins' superstructure. In the distance, the supposed merchant vessel raises its guns, along with a new flag and deadly intent. This imposter thinks it's springing a trap, but little does it know that the American ship is not quite what it seems either. Stephen Hopkins has a dangerous secret and a crazy plan of its own. An unexpected clash. On board Stephen Hopkins, Captain Paul Buck's order to hard left rudder rings out across the ship. Hopkins is one of the U.S. Merchant Marine's Liberty ships, a simple, low-cost, mass-produced vessel described by President Franklin D. Roosevelt as, quote, a dreadful-looking object, and Time magazine as, quote, an ugly duckling. With a limited arsenal of just one 4-inch naval gun, plus a pair of 37mm cannons and 6 machine guns, Hopkins was never intended to engage in battle. But that's exactly what she's going to do. Hopkins swings about, presenting her stern to the enemy to offer the smallest possible target while bringing her lone 4-inch gun to bear. On the bridge, Chief Mate Richard Miskovsky positions himself where he can watch the enemy vessel and relay information to Buck. Below decks, Second Assistant Engineer George Kronk dons a telephone headset to contact the bridge, unaware of the full extent of the danger above. Their attacker hoists their ensign as it closes the distance. It's the German raider Stier. Originally built in 1936 as the 4,778-ton Cairo for the Atlas Levant line, she was acquired by the Kriegsmarine in 1939 and converted into a commerce raider 2 years later, repurposed specifically for this type of ambush. Hidden behind false deck panels and disguised as innocent cargo, her arsenal has allowed her captain, Fregattenkapitän Horst Gerlach, to outmaneuver and outgun any merchant vessel unfortunate enough to cross her path. On the American ship, there's still confusion about what's happening. The bow's 37mm guns remain unmanned. Sailors mill about amidships until Third Mate Walter Nyberg rushes down to order them to prepare for battle. Ensign Kenneth Willett, commander of the Naval Armed Guard, sprints toward his battle station with the stern gun when a high-explosive shell bursts nearby. A shell fragment tears into his stomach, but the young officer continues onward, determined to reach the 4-inch gun. The battle has barely begun when Chief Steward Ford Stilson, preparing menus in his cabin, receives word that the chief mate has been wounded. He rushes to the bridge with bandages and antiseptics to find Miskovsky with a chest wound and an injured left arm. As Stilson applies a tourniquet, Miskovsky shouts through his pain to keep the ship turning, with her stern bearing on the enemy. Instead of causing panic, as the German commander intended, the intense fire galvanizes the American crew into action. Second Mate Joseph Lehman's 37mm guns on the bow fire first, their shells pounding into Stier. One by one, machine gun crews join the battle, their scattered bursts growing into a steady roar as tracer bullets guide the inexperienced gunners. On the stern, the wounded Ensign Willett reaches the 4-inch gun and rallies his young Naval Armed Guard crew. His orders are short and crisp. One seaman grabs a shell from the ready magazine and shoves it into the breech, while another relays the range, 1,000 yards. Despite his stomach wound, Willett directs them to aim for the raiders' waterline. The 4-inch gun roars, and seconds later, the shell explodes inside Stier. A direct hit on the first shot. The battle intensifies. The American gunners cheer as smoke billows from the German raider, but there's no time for celebration. Stier's guns answer with a thunderous barrage, her superior firepower bringing devastating weight to bear. The battle erupts into a furious exchange of shells between the American merchant vessel and the German warship. In the engine room, the deck shudders and the lights go out with each recoil of Hopkins's main gun. Engineer Kronk stands rigid in the darkness, watching the boiler fires, until dim emergency lights flicker on, casting eerie shadows through the steam-filled compartment. Despite the chaos, he and his black gang keep the engines turning, maintaining the ship's position to allow the stern gun to keep firing. Topside, a high explosive shell strikes the freighter's bow, wrecking the 37mm gun platform and leaving the gun handlers badly wounded or lifeless. Another shell destroys the radio room, silencing the radio man's frantic SOS signals. The lifeboats along the port side dangle, splintered and torn from their davits. German gunnery continues to tear gaping holes in the hull, while incendiary shells start new fires throughout the ship. But Captain Buck still commands a fighting ship. His machine gunners pepper both Stier and Tannenfels with deadly accuracy. When the raider attempts to maneuver into position for a devastating 6-gun broadside, Buck ensures the helmsman keeps Stephen Hopkins stern on, minimizing their target profile while allowing their main gun to continue firing. At the stern, Ensign Willett's gun crew operates with remarkable efficiency despite their youth and limited training. In less than 20 minutes, they fire 35 4-inch rounds, most hitting Stier near the waterline. Between salvos, Willett, still bleeding from his stomach wound, praises his men and shouts encouragement to the seamen, passing ammunition up from the magazine. Through the smoke, the effects of their gunnery become clear. The raider lists slightly to port and settles by the stern. Fires burn from stern to bow. The easy victory that Gerlach had hoped for is rapidly falling apart. A shell from the merchantman's lone gun has disabled his torpedo tubes, and a fire threatens his magazine. Below decks, his men struggle in waist-deep water to plug holes below the waterline. Fight to the end. Stier is now fighting to stay afloat, but with his vastly superior firepower, Gerlach has no intention of breaking off the battle. He orders his gun director to silence the enemy's 4-inch gun, their only significant threat. Exploding shells seeking the gun tub begin to rock Stephen Hopkins' stern. One shell misses its target and smashes into the engine room. The starboard boiler bursts in a catastrophic explosion. Steam billows into every crevice of the darkened engine room, rolling up ladders, scalding men. The ship's power plant is crippled, and Stephen Hopkins loses headway until she's lumbering along at barely 1 knot. Unaware of the extent of the situation in the engine room, Captain Buck calls for more speed, but receives no answer. The scorched and suffocating remnants of the engine crew stumble out into the daylight, collapsing onto the exposed decks. Among them is second engineer George Kronk, his skin reddened from the scalding steam. As Stephen Hopkins lies badly damaged, Gerlach's gun crews continue blasting her with salvos, determined to finish her off. Still, even with her stern in ruins, her 4-inch gun fires back. One by one, the armed guard crew falls until Willett mans the gun alone, struggling to load another shell when a German round hits the magazine below the gun tub. The harried German captain, seeing the explosion, assumes that the gun is finally out of action. His own ship is settling at the stern, and a telephone talker relays reports of fires at either end of the ship, including one worryingly close to a magazine. What's more, the sea is rising. A light intermittent rain is falling, and visibility is deteriorating. Gerlach orders his gun crews to hurry and sink the merchantman, so he can focus on saving his own vessel. On SS Stephen Hopkins, the blast from the ammunition storage had violently thrown Ensign Willett across the gun platform, adding fresh injuries to his already wounded body. As he attempts to regain his footing, the most junior crew member aboard the vessel steps forward to take control of the weapon. Edwin O'Hara, a teenage engineering cadet, barely 18 years old, who had escaped the inferno below, had picked up basic gunnery skills during his training at the Kings Point Merchant Marine Academy and through Willett's mentorship. He quickly examines the gun. Though it's damaged, it is still in firing condition. In the ready magazine lie 5 live rounds. O'Hara shoves one into the breech, points the gun, and yanks the firing lanyard. The barrel jumps, and a 4-inch shell hits Stier. Despite flames consuming the ammunition compartment beneath him, O'Hara continues alone, methodically loading and discharging all 4 remaining shells over a distance of 900 yards. His marksmanship proves exceptional, with projectiles finding their mark on both Stier and Tannenfels. On Stephen Hopkins Bridge, Captain Buck surveys the blazing wreck around him. The enemy barrage has ruptured the starboard boiler, obliterated communications equipment, toppled the mast, crippled the steering mechanisms, and torn apart both the hull and deckhouse structure. SS Stephen Hopkins has put up an incredible fight for 20 minutes, but with the superstructure afire and his command sinking beneath him, and the 4-inch gun out of rounds, Buck reluctantly gives the order to abandon ship. The escape. Now the race is on to escape. Captain Buck leads from the front. He and George Kronk race to check the ship's lifeboats, but they find only one remaining in serviceable condition. Together, they struggle to lower it into the water as shellfire continues to demolish Stephen Hopkins. During this effort, a shell bursts nearby, the shrapnel claiming the lives of 2 men and wounding 4 others. The small boat is badly holed, taking to the water in poor shape for a long ocean voyage, but as the only one they have left, Stephen Hopkins' crew will have to make do and pray it can hold out long enough to get them to safety. The American ship is engulfed in flames as German shells continue to rain down on her. Engineer Kronk, having helped to lower the damaged lifeboat, jumps overboard. Meanwhile, staying true to naval captain tradition, Buck remains on the deck, helping injured men and ensuring as many as possible can reach the lifeboat or one of several smaller life rafts. Yet not everyone makes it. Cadet O'Hara, who had single-handedly kept the 4-inch gun firing after everyone else was incapacitated, is hit by shrapnel shortly after leaving the gun tub. Chief Mate Moskovsky, last seen badly wounded on the starboard side of the boat deck, never makes it off the ship. The last time anyone sees Ensign Willett, he is securing life rafts for his naval armed guard and the merchant sailors before he too vanishes in the chaos. Across the water, Stier is in no better condition than Stephen Hopkins. The damage inflicted by the Liberty ship has proven fatal. Fire rages throughout the raider, and without power, her firefighting equipment is useless. Captain Gerlach, whose ship had terrorized Allied shipping and sunk or captured almost 50,000 tons of British and American shipping, makes the painful decision to scuttle his vessel. After ordering detonating charges set, his crew also abandons ship. Both vessels are now in their final throes. At 11:30 a.m., Stephen Hopkins finally slips beneath the waves. 10 minutes later, she's joined by Stier. The battle has ended in mutual destruction, but while the German sailors are quickly picked up by Tannenfels to begin their journey to the safety of occupied France, the surviving members of Hopkins' crew are left behind. An impossible journey. On board the damaged lifeboat, 19 American sailors face the vastness of the South Atlantic. Notably absent from their number is Captain Paul Buck. After leading the efforts to fill the boat, Buck took his chances on a small life raft and was last spotted drifting off across the waves, never to be seen again. Now, Engineer Kronk is in command, but the wind is rising, the sea running high, and visibility deteriorating rapidly. For 2 hours, they row through the debris field, searching for more survivors, despite their blistered hands. They spot third mate Walter Nyberg in one of the smashed lifeboats that had been blown off by shellfire, bolstered at one end by a donut raft. But even rowing as hard as they cannot reach him because of the wind and seas. A while later, another donut raft with at least 5 men goes by, but the worsening conditions make it impossible to rescue the sailors. Refusing to give up on the possibility of encountering and saving further survivors, Kronk puts out his sea anchor and drifts in the vicinity until noon the next day, but finds only floating wreckage. Deciding it's time to give up on searching for the other crewmates and focus on getting the ones with him on the lifeboat to safety, he orders his able-bodied men to rig a sail and begin heading northwest. The days that follow test their endurance to the limit. On board, resources are minimal. The supplies of malted milk tablets, sea rations, and chocolate might last around a month if they're lucky. With just 24 gallons of water between them, on October 1st, Kronk cuts the water ration to 6 ounces per day per man, giving more to the wounded. The sailors try to boost their reserves by catching rainwater using the sailcloth, but chemicals in the fabric give the water a bad taste. One by one, the weaker men succumb. On October 7th, McDaniels, a cook, passes away. Kronk stops the ship for 5 minutes to give him a sea burial. The next day, Romero, a mess boy, meets the same fate. Meanwhile, Gunner Brock develops an infected shoulder as a result of his shrapnel wounds. On October 11th, the surviving crew members receive a glimmer of hope when something sends up a green rocket right over their mast from a very short distance. Believing it to be a friendly submarine who could potentially save them, Kronk orders the men to fire 2 flares into the sky. But no rescue comes. The men's health continues to deteriorate. George Galagades, a fireman, passes away on October 12th, followed by Wiper Demetrides 4 days later. Meanwhile, the weather conditions go from bad to worse. By October 19th, high winds and seas force them to bail all night, with everyone wet from rain and spray. Kronk notes in his log, quote, "Most everyone has sores that won't heal." By October 23rd, after 26 days on the lifeboat, supplies are running critically low. Kronk orders food rations cut in half. Each man will now receive just 1 ounce of Premacan, 1 ounce of chocolate, half an ounce of malted milk tablets, and 1 C-ration biscuit per day. At the same time, there's a change in the weather. Instead of rain, wind, and choppy seas, the crew is now subjected to intense heat and still air that makes sailing impossible. The men are stuck in the middle of the ocean, and their chances of survival grow slimmer by the hour. Kronk adds another entry in his log, quote, "Very hot, everyone very weak." Then something extraordinary happens. A butterfly flutters past the boat, followed by 2 moths. These fragile creatures couldn't have flown far over open water. The weary sailors exchange glances, hope kindling for the first time in days. At sunset, a fair breeze finally picks up, and Kronk orders the course change to due west. The next day, another yellow moth appears. Kronk is sure they must be near land. The men strain their eyes toward the western horizon, searching for any sign of the coast. Then, in the pre-dawn darkness of October 27th, the moment they've been praying for finally arrives. Kronk jubilantly records, quote, "Hurrah! Sighted land, 4 a.m. The dim outline of the Brazilian coast emerges from the gloom. Salvation after an epic journey. They navigate toward shore and land at the small Brazilian village of Barro do Itapapuana. As they beach their battered lifeboat, the 15 surviving men, emaciated, sun-blackened, and bearded after a month at sea, are greeted with astonishment by local villagers who rush to assist them. Word quickly spreads about the American sailors who appeared like ghosts from the sea. Lieutenant Joseph E. Rich travels from Vitoria by taxi, Piper Cub airplane, and locomotive to meet them. What he finds amazes him. Despite the ordeal that has claimed 4 lives during the crossing and left everyone malnourished and covered in salt sores, the survivors display remarkable resilience, with Rich reporting that they are, quote, "in wonderful condition, considering what they'd gone through." Even more striking is the bond forged through their shared ordeal. After 30 days of being battered together in a cramped lifeboat, covering 2,200 miles with scarce rations and constant peril, the men know their survival had only been possible due to their mutual support. And now, finally back on dry land, they loudly praise one another's extraordinary courage. George Kronk modestly refuses credit for his leadership role in navigating the men to safety. Instead, he pays tribute to Ensign Willett and Cadet O'Hara, ensuring their sacrifices aboard SS Stephen Hopkins would not be forgotten. Legacy and Honor. On November 2nd, Tannenfels, although damaged, finally reaches Le Verdon-sur-Mer, near Bordeaux, carrying Commander Gerlach and his officers, men, and prisoners. Submitting his battle report on arrival, Gerlach describes how Stier had been sunk by a heavily armed cruiser, refusing to admit the embarrassing truth that his once mighty warship had been defeated by a merchant ship with limited weaponry. SS Stephen Hopkins holds the distinction of being the only U.S. merchant vessel to sink a German surface combatant during the entire war, as well as being the only merchant ship in history to sink a cruiser. The United States bestows various posthumous honors on the ship and crew. Stephen Hopkins herself receives a gallant ship citation, and 2 later Liberty ships are christened Stephen Hopkins II and Paul Buck. A destroyer escort is named for Ensign Willett, while on the campus of the United States Merchant Marine Academy, a major building is named O'Hara Hall. For extraordinary heroism and conspicuous courage, Willett is posthumously awarded the Navy Cross. Merchant Marine Distinguished Service Medals are posthumously bestowed on Captain Buck, Cadet Midshipman O'Hara, Chief Mate Richard Moskovsky, and Second Engineer George Kronk, among others. A spokesman for the Office of the Chief of Naval Operations gives a final, comprehensive tribute to all who served on Stephen Hopkins during her great fight, saying, quote, The extraordinary heroism and outstanding devotion to duty of the officers and crew of the armed guard and the ship's company were in keeping with the highest tradition of American seamanship. Their fearless determination to fight for their ship and perseverance to engage the enemy to the utmost until their ship was rendered useless, aflame and in a sinking condition, demonstrated conduct beyond the call of duty. The humble Liberty ship, designed not for combat but for carrying cargo, had written an unforgettable page in naval history. She represents the courage of the merchant marine, whose members face the perils of war without the recognition given to the regular armed forces, despite suffering the highest casualty rate of any service. SS Stephen Hopkins' story stands as testimony to the indomitable spirit of American mariners who, when faced with overwhelming odds, chose to fight rather than surrender.